Today is April 26, 2024. My interviewee is Jeanette Nadel. My name is Barbara Beyer, the interviewer. We're in Wellington, Florida, in the USA. Please tell me your name today.
My married name is Jeanette Nadel.
Can you spell that?
Jeannette. Last name Nadel, Nadle.
And what was your name at birth?
Jeanette Bertman. Bertman in French.
And could you spell that for me, please?
Sure. Jeanette, Jeannette. Last name Bertman.
And what other names did you have? Nicknames or anything else?
My Jewish name, which nobody knows in the family, and which I'm going to reveal now, was Nesher. Now, how it became Jeanette or Jeannette, that was when my father registered me. The registrar interpreted Nesher as Jeanette or Jeannette in French.
What did your mother call you?
My mother called me Jeannette or Neschele when I was pretty young. But then it became Janet.
And what is your date of birth?
October 10th, 1931.
That makes you how old today?
92 years old.
Where were you born?
Brussels, Belgium.
And where in the city did you live?
In the center of the city.
Surrounding areas were?
Molenbeek, I remember that one. The others, Ixelles. And that's about the extent of my memory of that.
Describe where you lived. Describe the home that you lived in.
You mean before the war, just, all right. We lived, the exact address was, I was going to say it in French, I'll say it in English, 31 Rue de la Caserne. And that was in the center of Brussels. It was what in America we call a 3-story home, apartment house. We lived on the middle floor. And my memory of it was that it was a pretty large apartment with a dining room, a kitchen, and the kitchen was the place where we lived all the time. The dining room, that was it. That was only when you had guests. The bedroom, my parents' bedroom, and then there was a smaller room which was my bedroom, and I don't recall my brother and sister's bedrooms. They probably shared one. I do not recall.
And what do you remember of your room specifically?
Of mine? It was pretty narrow. There was a bed, and that was about it.
What was your favorite toy as a child?
Well, I have to admit, I didn't have many toys. I come from a pretty, I wouldn't say poor, but there was no money to be spent on toys. That was a frivolous thing as far as my family was concerned. So playing was mainly on the street, playing with my brother and his friends. And as a little girl, that was a lot of fun.
We'll get to your siblings in a minute. But who were your neighbors? You were in the middle floor. Who was on the top floor and who was on the bottom floor?
The bottom floor was a printing place, so that was commercial. He was producing whatever it was that he was printing. Were the middle floor, and above us was another Jewish family. We didn't have much to do with each other. I can recall there were, I think, 2 or 3 children older than I was, but they felt they were of a different class, a little bit more elevated than we were. We were the little ruffians.
What was their names? Do you remember their last
No, I
names?
do not.
How did the Jewish population and the non-Jewish population get along in Brussels before the war?
Personally, I don't remember any kind of anti-Semitism when I was a child before the war. Maybe an incident here, no, that was not until the war broke out. My best little friend was a little boy from down the street who was living with his grandparents, and he and I used to enjoy tumbling together in the street or whatever we were doing. So we mingled pretty well.
What was his name, your friend, the little friend?
Pierrot, Little Peter in English.
And his last name?
Do not know, do not remember.
Was he a little Jewish boy or not?
No, he was Christian.
So now let's go to your family. What was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Sarah Gittler Rosenbaum, maiden name.
And where was she born?
I believe Lublin, Poland.
Do you recall her date of birth?
We gave them dates of birth and birthdays because they didn't know. She was born, I know, she was born around Lublin, Poland. The year my sister, brother, and I decided that 1901 would be appropriate. That was a guess, plus or minus 1.
And her occupation?
She was a dressmaker and a housemaker, a housewife, alternating, depending where we were living.
Okay. Would you describe her personality?
I am doing this now as an adult, having reflected on life. My mother was a very, very intelligent and bright woman. Had she had the opportunity to be educated, she probably would have produced something in the field of literature. She liked to read. Not much was available to her in terms of literature. There wasn't that much in Yiddish, and Yiddish was the language of my parents, of the little ghetto of Lublin, where they came from. She was also a very devoted mother and wife. She was also a pretty strict individual. But if not for her wisdom and tenacity, I wouldn't be here. So if I want to summarize, she was not the kind of person who would cuddle you, but you knew that she loved you. There was no outside expressions of it, but she was a mother.
So how then would you describe your relationship with her?
I respected her. Once in a while, there was a show of tenderness, but not often. My mother's philosophy was, you do everything for your child. You show your feelings when your child is asleep. It was a different way of being brought up, but it was something that I accepted, I grew up with. I think I did pretty well.
So now let's go to your dad. What was your father's name?
David, in English, Yiddish, David Bertman.
And
I want to add something here when you asked me his name. His father came to the States before World War I. His father's name was Fleischman. How it became Bertman, I am not sure, but I suspect it was because my father attempted not to be taken into service in Poland and may have changed the name at that time. But that's just a suspicion. I'm not sure. But my paternal grandfather is buried in New Jersey under the name of Fleischman.
and where is he buried?
Somewhere in New Jersey, not far from Somerville, New Jersey, in a Jewish cemetery that we visited once, my late husband, my parents, and I, but I don't remember where.
And where was your father born?
My father was born in Poland too, in Grubyszow. Don't ask me to spell that. Grubyszow. And he was probably a year older than my mother.
Where in relationship to Lublin is Grubyszow?
I don't know. I'm not even quite sure of the spelling of it. It starts with a G, R, and after that, I don't know. But if I remember correctly, remembering some of the talks, it depended upon the time of the period, whether it was Polish or whether it was Russian. You know, it was going back and forth.
And your father's occupation?
A cap maker, military cap makers, uniform cap maker.
Was there a specific company that he worked for?
In Belgium, yes. The biggest uniform company in Belgium. It was called Fonson, Jules Fonson. My father had the dubious honor of having made the cap, the uniform cap for the King of Belgium. And for many years, my father carried an article cut out from the newspaper that said, horror of horror, a Jew made the uniform cap for the King of Belgium. But it was well made.
And describe your father's personality.
A very gentle man. Very quiet, My mother was the domineering person, but he had big influence. And I didn't realize how big the influence was until he passed away. But if not for his craft and his craftsmanship, I wouldn't be here.
What kind of influence did you recognize afterward?
It took me a long time. I had to be an adult to realize how influential he was
In
my
what way? In what way?
a calming influence. The only time he ever made a negative comment was when I wanted to go for a master's degree, and knew was dating the young man who became my husband. Just like the old philosophy, my father said, "What do you need another diploma for? You're going to get married, you're going to have children, you don't need that." Otherwise, it was always there positively.
And describe your relationship with him then, early on, your relationship with your father.
Obedient daughter, obedient child, enjoyed being in his company.
And you mentioned your brother and your
Sis-
sister earlier. Tell me about them.
My sister was 4.5 years older than I am. My brother was 2.5 years older.
Their names?
The Jewish name for my sister was Malka Norma. We only knew her as Marie in French and Marie in English. My brother Nathan, whom we never called Nathan, but Nat, whether it was English, French, or Yiddish, was my companion ever since I remember. We did a lot of playing together until adolescence. And then he didn't want to have anything to do with his little sister. Then he became very close to his older sister. But we all got along.
So, how was it for you being the little sister?
At times irritating.
Who else lived in your house beside your mother, father, and the three of you?
My grandmother lived in the same building for a while with her youngest son. My grandmother came to Belgium after her husband passed away with the youngest of 8, my uncle Marcel, who came to Belgium at the age, I think, of 13 or 14, upon the death of my maternal grandfather. But they didn't live in the apartment, it was in the house. There was a room between the second and the third floor that they occupied. And then just before we went into hiding, probably about a year before that, my grandmother and her youngest son got a place of their own, not too far from where we lived.
Tell me about your grandparents.
Well,
Start with your maternal grandparents.
My maternal, my grandmother was the only one that I ever knew. typical old lady with very long skirt, wearing a sheitel, or what we call in English a wig, on a holiday or Saturday. But I loved her and she loved me, and very often on Friday night, she and I would walk to a little synagogue, which was like in a private home, first and second floor for the women, first floor for the men. And I used to enjoy spending time with her. Not that she was telling any stories, no typical grandmother, but she liked me and I liked her. She loved me and I loved her.
What was her name?
I called her Bube. I don't know. It was Naimark, and I do not remember her first name. She died, unfortunately, when we were in hiding. She was in hiding separately, and she passed away without anybody around her, any member of the family.
Of natural causes?
No. She became ill, underwent some kind of surgery, abdominal of some kind, and never got off the operating table. But my mother succeeded, even while in hiding, under the occupation, to have her buried in a Jewish cemetery. That's what I mean by my mother was a tenacious and brave woman.
How religious was your family?
We were not religious.
And
We were Jews, but not religious.
what holidays did you celebrate?
None to speak of. You have to understand that my parents were trying very hard to make a living. We lived in a Catholic country, a Christian country. Saturday was another working day. Saturday, my father went to work. I never gave it a thought that there was something wrong doing that. As I said, we were Jews. There was a feeling of Judaism without expressing it religiously. It's very hard to describe, but it was there.
But you did say a little earlier that you went to a service in shul with your grandmother.
My grandmother was good. She was not literate. She did not know how to read, but she took the book and she turned the pages. But I was there, and I, on the second floor, would take the nuts or the raisins and drop them on the boy who was bar mitzvah that day. It's very funny to remember this.
So you really didn't celebrate any Jewish holidays?
We knew of the holidays, but celebrating, no. And that is why the second floor, the people above us, didn't want to have anything to do with us. We were goyim, as far as they were concerned.
Was there any Jewish food that was prepared in your house?
Yes, yes. Passover, we had matzah. We had what we called chemslech. Saturday, there was always chicken and chicken soup and noodles that mother made, made the dough and let it dry and on the bed. And then, so there were that kind of ritual, and gefilte fish, whatever they could afford.
What was your favorite?
In terms of foods, I used to enjoy standing next to my mother while she was, like we say in Yiddish, hacking, preparing the fish. And I used to enjoy going with her to buy the kosher chicken and watch the man pluck the chickens. So those are the things that I remember, but no religious background, no religious education. What my brother and I attended, and of course that stopped when we went into hiding, was a Jewish school. After school, after the regular school, we would go, and what did we learn? Nothing religious.
So what
But
kind of things did they talk about
I
while you?
don't remember. I don't remember. But that was one thing we did. We went to a music school. So there was, even though my parents were not educated, they didn't stand in our way for getting an education. And I knew ever since I was a child that I was going to be going to school, that I was going to be something else than what my parents were. Not that I looked down on what they were, but we were brought up with the idea, with being told that education was necessary. Education was something to do, to get.
So being that you went to this Jewish school, what books did you read at home? What newspapers were there? What radio was?
I didn't read anything.
Radio?
In order to go to a library, you had to be a Belgian. You had to be able to afford to go to a library. So my parents didn't know much.
Was there a radio in the house?
No,
Newspapers?
probably a Jewish newspaper. What we achieved, the three of us, was having somehow been told, and it became part of my being and my brother's being, the same for my sister, but in a different way probably, that we had to get educated and to do something else than what my parents did. Without telling us that, we just knew that. That's what I mean by having good parents.
How many of your extended family lived in Brussels?
My father came to Belgium in 1929, leaving behind my mother and her two children. My brother must have been 6 months old or so. And he came to Belgium on his way to get to the United States, the land of gold, easier than from Poland. And why the United States? Because that's where his father and his two sisters had emigrated before World War I. So he landed in Brussels, not too far from Antwerp, where there was a boat to go to the United States, and stopped there. Eventually got a job as a cap maker and brought my mother and her two children. And then I was born in Brussels. So my mother managed to bring over from Poland one of her brothers. my uncle Marcel, my uncle Marc. Then her father passed away, and she brought over her mother, my grandmother, my Bubba, and my uncle, the youngest one, Marcel Menashe. And then just before the war broke out, 1939, they brought over another brother of my mother's, Froyam, and his wife. But she didn't like, she was missing her family, and they went back in 1939 to Lublin, and they disappeared.
So how many brothers and sisters did your mother have
In Belgium,
in total, just in general?
she had 2 sisters, and she had a brother who lost his twin. So I'm only going to say how many living. So she had Marc, Marcel, Yitzhak, 3 brothers.
And so, looking back towards your early life, how many family members would you say perished during the war because of the war?
In Poland,
Approximately.
I'd say between 20, 25. I don't know how many little cousins I had. Who knows? The uncle and aunt who went back from Belgium didn't have any child when they were in Belgium, but they had a child in Lublin, and then they eventually perished in the Warsaw Ghetto.
Can you describe what life was like in Brussels once you were there before the war as a child?
It was a good life. I went to school, I walked to school. Schools were, the word right now, I was going to speak French, the word escapes me. It was girls and boys separate. So I had a little girls around that I knew from school, none of them living on the same street where I lived. A little boy living down the block, whom I was very friendly. So life was great. We'd walk to school at perhaps 8 o'clock in the morning, came back around noontime, had our big meal at that time, because dinner was really lunch, what we have lunch here, and then dinner that we have here was really just a small meal. I came back around 4 o'clock. Mother would always have a glass of dark beer, you hear me, and a slab of white bread with butter, and that was so good. There's nothing that I remember more than the bread, the fresh bread. The beer, if you don't want to ask me why, Mother thought that I was always very short, very small. She thought that the beer would make me grow, but look at what I am. It's funny.
What was the name of the school that you attended?
Oh, it was by numbers. I remember where it was, Place Annesens, but I don't remember the number. There was a girls' school, and not too far from there was the boys' school. I don't remember walking with my brother, or I don't know. We were pretty pretty independent, going to where we had to go. There was no fear.
What was your favorite thing about school as far as the subject matter?
Probably, I should have brought out, probably writing script. Uh, Nothing in particular.
A favorite teacher?
Well, you started the first grade with one teacher and you stayed with that teacher until the sixth grade. So I was with that teacher for 5 years. And I remember Madame Beuys very well. Because, if I may stop for a minute, when we were in hiding, and this is going to be showing you the character of my mother. While we were in the attic, my mother managed to contact Madame Beuys and ask for books for me, so that my brother and sister could teach me while we were in hiding. What's extraordinary is that she did it for me, but didn't do it for neither my brother nor my sister. Yet I didn't feel that I was the privileged child.
What kind of books did she bring?
She didn't bring books. It was notebooks from a classmate that would show what had been done in the class in the sixth grade, which I never attended. And my brother and sister were my teachers. My brother had, when we went into hiding, my brother had been in the second year, I think, of the Athénée, which is the private school. And he had had some Latin. So he taught me some Latin. And my sister taught me a little bit of algebra. So, but books, I don't remember any.
In the notebooks that the teacher gave you, what kind of lessons were in those notebooks?
As I said, some spelling, I don't remember really.
What language did you speak at home?
Yiddish.
Outside the home?
French. And among us, the kids, even in the home, we wouldn't speak Yiddish to each other. It was French. But my parents, that was a Yiddish home.
Would you describe yourself as a child?
A dirty little girl running around in the street. When I think back of the way we were, and we were privileged by comparison to the upbringing of my parents, that was perhaps considered luxury, but there was no bathroom. Yes, there was a toilet that was between was it between the two? No, it was between the main floor and the first floor. So that was being used by two families. The first floor, which we say second floor here, and the family above us. There was running water, cold water. No shower, no bathtub. I don't know what I looked like.
And your personality as a child, what was that like?
I don't know. That's pretty hard to describe. You're asking a question that, if I look back, I was a carefree kid running in the street. I didn't turn out too badly.
So the school that you went to was a mixed school
No,
as far
no.
as just Jewish children?
No, if you mean mixed. No, it was a city school. So it was mixed in terms of, yes, there were Jewish children and Christian children.
And how was that for you?
No problem. Except when the war broke out. And one little girl turned to me and said, "Because of you, we don't have enough bread." That's something I never forgot.
How did you answer her?
I didn't. I didn't.
How did that make you feel?
I was kind of stunned that she made that comment, and I kind of brushed it off, but not completely, because more than 80 years later, I still remember. But I grew up, I should say, without a chip on my shoulder. I made the best of what I was able to get. My nose is dripping.
Were there movies or any cultural events that you attended?
That's a different world. No. But I remember going to the Jewish theater one time with my parents. Don't ask me what I saw, but an American troupe. Can't think of the first name of that actor. The last name was Schwartz. Must have been a very well-known Jewish actor, because we went there, and that's the only time I was exposed to going someplace, and I don't remember anything about the play.
What were your first signs of danger?
When we had to wear the yellow star.
Tell me about that.
You know, it was, I understood we had to do it. There was a feeling of, you do what you have to at the time if you want to survive. And that was something that was with me all the time. You don't ask, you act.
What kind of conversations was the family having?
None in front of us. All I remember, it must have been in July 42, that we were dispatched in the country to go into hiding. At first with Flemish farmers, my brother in one place, my sister in another place, I somewhere else. We were gone. My parents were left in, I had no idea what and when, but I knew it was, I had to do that. I don't think that, I didn't analyze it as a child, and I don't understood the intensity of the danger. Not until I lived into it.
Who took you to the place of hiding?
A neighbor, a Christian neighbor, the first one, the first place where I went, excuse me. This woman was going to the countryside to bring back some foods which she was selling on the black market. My parents got to know them, got to know her, and when my parents went into hiding, due to the fact that my father was such a good craftsman, somebody he had met at a place where he was working decided to put himself into business. And he said to my father, I will hide you and your wife. If you will work for me, I will pay you. But I don't want the children. So, excuse me. So my parents had to do something with the children. So this woman was the source of finding our first hiding place as children in the countryside with 3 different farmers. I stayed with the first one probably not more than 2 weeks or so, because there was a little boy of my age there, and he did not like that a girl was there encroaching on his territory. So I was shifted to another place.
What was the woman's name who took you?
I don't remember. She was being paid for that. Everything my parents did, they paid for. They were not wealthy, but whatever they earned from Maurice, who was employing them, went for their survival and for our survival.
So where was this place that you stayed for 2 weeks? In what?
No idea. Don't remember. It was in the Flemish country.
How did you get there?
Probably by train or by trolley. Don't remember. There was a lot of haze at that time, meaning haze diary. And I guess it was if I analyze it now, it was a protective feeling. Don't think, just do.
And so the same lady came back for you after 2 weeks? Or was it a different person?
It probably was one farmer finding another farmer who was willing to do so.
And then where did you go after that 2 weeks that you?
To another farmer in another village, not too far from where my brother was.
And what was the name of the village?
I don't remember.
And your brother and your sister were where?
My brother in one village and my sister in another one. I didn't know where my sister was. Whether she knew where I was, I have no idea. I knew where my brother was because I was able to walk over there and see the fact that they were dispensing beer there. That was not uncommon. Many of the farms there had their own supply of beer, and it was a local little bar, which my brother enjoyed tremendously.
So while you were there in hiding, what did you know of what was happening in Brussels?
Nothing.
Did you know there was a war going on?
Well, I knew there was a war going on May 3rd, I think, 1940, when the Germans invaded Belgium.
Tell me about that.
All I remember, I was 8 years old, is looking up at the sky and seeing planes crossing each other. And before we knew it, the Germans were there. There was no opposition. The Germans just walked in through Belgium. Prior to that, living in the center of Brussels, my parents' apartment was the center of gathering of their friends. And they had gathered a few Sundays and talked about leaving Brussels and fleeing to the south of France. The reinforcement there, the protection was going to be the ligne Maginot, which meant that, England was going to be protected. The Germans would never get there and would get to the south of France, Portugal, and eventually to the United States. That much I remember listening. And they had decided, that whole group of adults, that they were going to hire, that they would either buy or hire or rent a truck. And a few families would just get onto the truck, and none of them drove, but they would have a driver, and they would they would leave Brussels, they would just flee Brussels and go to the south of France. The day we were supposed to leave, my mother got sick and couldn't leave, couldn't get out of bed. I think she had a few of those episodes that I couldn't recall at different times. And I think it was a fear reaction more than anything else. I'm no doctor, but this is what I remember. And although she tried to convince my father to leave, he would not. And that too saved our lives. So we stayed behind, never heard from the families who fled.
What year was that?
That was 1942.
On any occasion, did you see any Nazi soldiers?
Oh yes, they were walking through the streets. No, you knew them. I remember the color of the uniforms, and yes,
What fears did you have at that time?
would walk on the other side of the street if we saw them.
On any occasion were you stopped?
No.
So now you're hiding in the countryside.
Yes, I'm in the second farm, which was a much more pleasant place. The family there was the couple who owned the farm, her brother, the farmer's wife's brother, and they had a daughter. I guess she must have been around 14, 15 years old, who was in a convent. They were Flemish speaking. I was French speaking, didn't understand much much Flemish. The woman was very caring, very nice, but she had a brother who tried to be a little bit too nice to the little girl. So after I was innocent, I knew absolutely nothing of what was going on.
How old were you?
At that point, at about 10. And I remember the scene of his calling me over and sitting me on his lap, and his sister walking in at that time. And she made sure after that he was never near me by himself. Looking back, I understand what could have happened, but I was an innocent 10-year-old. So, because my father had the wisdom to make military caps for the uniform that police would wear at events. And he made 3 of those and made sure that 3 and more than that, but 3 of them were given to the heads of the police in each of the villages that we were at. And one day, not too long after we got there, one of the farmers was warned that the Germans were coming the next morning to get the Jewish children. Those caps, those military uniform hats saved us. So my sister knew where my parents lived. I had no idea. The three of us, along with another young man who was my brother's age and was hidden in that same place where my brother was, we got on either trolley or train. I have no idea. There was a lot, in my mind, a lot of confusion. I was just following. We got to Brussels. My sister knew where my parents were. We presented ourselves, the three of us, and Maurice Herzinger, who was employing and hiding my mother and father, didn't have the heart to send us away. So now you have my mother, my father, and the three of us hidden in the attic.
What restrictions at that time were being put on the Jewish population?
The restrictions. 1942, and I don't remember the month or so, the Germans, along with a Jewish group whose name I did not remember, but they were the governing Jewish group, were sending out requests or for men and the youth 16 or more to go to German camps, wait a minute, I used the wrong vocabulary, to go to work in Germany. If you received, the head of the family or any member of the family received that request and didn't honor it, that would be a danger, or I don't know how to explain that. By their going away, by responding, they were protecting the family. My father got such a summons, and my mother said, "You're not going?" There was the tenacity and the wisdom. And the mother hen trying to preserve, to save us. My mother said, "We're going into hiding, all of us, if we have to." And then came the ability for my parents to be hidden, for us to go into the various places, and that was the beginning of hiding.
Prior to that, what other laws were coming out against the Jews?
Every family had to register with that office. And that's how the Germans knew how many Jews there were and how to contact them and how to get them to eventually extermination, which we only found out afterwards.
And what other letters came?
Pardon?
What other letters came to restrict your food, your...
No, nothing. It was just, from what I remember, it was just, well, there was restrictions of food for the entire population, whether the Belgian population or anybody who lived there. But I do not, oh yes, the restrictions were wearing the yellow star, and restrictions of you couldn't be on the street after 8 o'clock in the evening, I believe it was.
And school?
You know, that was May. The school, I continued school until July when we went in, in the villages. That's all I remember at that time.
Then tell me about going into the attic.
there were 2 rooms, no water, no heat. One room was reserved for the sewing machines, and it was really the workroom, but there was a cot there for my brother. And then the other room was the kitchen. There was gas. My mother was able to cook. No bathroom facilities at all, no running water. And that room had that stove and a bed for my sister and I. My parents, on the other hand, had a bedroom. There was like what we called an annex between the second and the third floor. There was a room set aside that the man who was hiding my parents was renting along with his apartment, and that's where my parents lived. I don't remember ever being in that room. I have no idea what was there. Most probably there was water there, running water, because my parents used to bring up the water when they came up in the morning, and they would take down the whatever they had to get rid of, and that's how we lived.
Whose house was it? Who was this man?
I don't know who owned the house, but each member, each resident was a rental. It was a rental house. So I have no idea.
And who led you there? Who was the person who led you to the attic?
Maurice Herzinger, he was living there. He was living on the 3rd floor. There was a store street level, there was a store, millinery. Above that store was the owner of that store. Maybe she owned the building, I don't know. Above her was Maurice and his wife, Lisette, who was my father's employer, then was hiding us. Above that was a family of a mother, her mother, 2 women, daughter and mother, and a young man who was, I think, 19 years old, and had also, because Belgians were called to go to these work camps, and he did not, so he was in hiding too, along with the Jews on top. And this, his mother was a voice teacher and had a piano. And periodically we would go down, or I remember sitting at the piano and being able to, do my own little playing. And above that was, and I'm trying to remember her name now, a single woman who had a big apartment. And in order to be able to make some money, she was renting out one of her bedrooms for the entertainment of the lady of the night. And the lady of the night very often was bringing a German officer there. So you can imagine the additional fear that my parents had. I didn't understand a lot of this.
So how long did the family stay together in the attic?
My parents stayed there for 2 years, from 42 to the liberation, 1944. I became ill, again with the help of mon oncle, and then my regular uncle, who had gotten in touch or was helped by the underground due to the fact that my mother's brother, my uncle, was a member of a group known as Esperantists, which, if you know, they were going to have one language throughout the world. And they were essentially doctors and teachers. This was an educated group. And due to that, of course, they were anti-German and pro-Belgian, fiercely so.
And this uncle's name again?
Mark Rosenbaum.
And you mentioned mon uncle, and who is that?
Mon uncle was the person who was hiding my Uncle Marc and his wife and 1-year-old little daughter. And he was mon oncle.
But his name was?
I don't know their last name. I have pictures of them, but I don't know his last name. He was the one who once a week would come from because he was not a farmer, but he lived in the countryside, had a very small, it was not a commercial farm. What he had was chickens and...
This was a non-Jewish person?
Non-Jewish. And he was the one who would come once a week and bring my parents food for money. Everything was monetary exchange, but those people who did those things were patriots. Now I lost my train of thought. What was I trying to tell you?
We're talking about how long your parents were in hiding, and then you got sick?
And I got sick and was taken to a private clinic run by nuns. Again, a doctor.
What was your illness?
Appendicitis, so I had to have some surgery. I was there for at least a week, I remember that much. And coming out of there, it was suggested, doctors didn't think that an attic was adequate or was a way of getting back on my feet. And that is the time that mon oncle got me to Madame Roy, to Rebec.
And how did you get there?
Probably by trolley. Don't remember.
And your recovery from the appendicitis was?
Complete.
So tell me about Madame Roy.
Spell
her name. Let's spell her name first.
Jeanne Roy, Jeanne, last name Roy, Rowart. She was the bright light of that time in my life, and afterwards too, after the liberation.
Tell me about her situation. Was she a married woman? Did she have a family?
Okay.
Where did she live?
She was living in Rebec, which is a little town, I think about 30 miles northwest of Brussels. If it's west or east, let's accept it. She lived, her husband had been captured. He had been in the military, and when the Germans invaded, he was taken to a camp in Germany. She was living in Rebec in the biggest house of Rebec, known as Le Château, the castle. And now we are in the French-speaking part of Belgium. La Wallonie. And Madame Roy, for me, Jeanne Roy, was an educated person. She had been trained as a nurse. She had no children.
How old was she?
At that time, I would suspect she must have been in her 40s, maybe close. Oh yeah, probably 40s. She had two sisters, one living in Brussels, married, no children, one living in Liège, married, two children, young men, the age of 18, 20. One of them, part of the underground, the eldest, was shot by the Germans. And that whole family, of course, was anti-Germans and ultra-patriots. Jeanne Roy received me with open arms and was like a mother to me. During that time and after the war, we continued our relationship, and she and then her husband were a couple that I looked up to, and that influenced my life. And looking back, I would say she was the strongest influence on me. She introduced me to literature. She introduced me to classical music, to opera. I knew nothing about that. She offered me shelter. I had a room to myself, a bed to myself, fresh linens, a bath, running water, heat. She had a lot of grounds. There were trees. I was able to pick apples, cherries, climb trees. This was a different world for me. And she was quite a patriot and quite involved with the underground. And in my own small little girl's way, I was able to participate in the patriotism, in helping some of the underground's efforts to act as patriots. It's the best way I can put it. So during the day, sometimes I helped bury some arms, some gasoline, and at night, the underground, the patriots came and then took whatever they needed to.
What was the name of the group, of the patriots in particular?
All I remember is that André Questelmont was the head of that division, that group, which was very well organized. He and his wife were the leaders, and they were in hiding too, while they were the leaders of conducting those, whatever we want to call it. They had a 15-year-old, let's say I was 10, yeah, they had a 15-year-old daughter who was living with her grandmother while her parents were in hiding too and conducting those activities. And Maurice Questemont was going from farm to farm, from village to village, after school on her bicycle, bringing whatever she had to bring from one group to the other. I met her at that time. I met her once after the war when she came to the lycée taking an exam, but she reminded me of that encounter when I went back in 2016 and we met as 80-year-old ladies and we recounted all these events that happened.
So she was basically your age or older than
No,
you?
she was 5 years older.
And her name again?
Maurice Questemont.
And her husband?
Maurice, I don't know her married name. I remember her as Maurice Questemont. And when we met again, as I said, in 2016, we didn't talk about names.
Who gave you the orders to bury the arms and the gasoline?
I don't know who, but Madame Roy and I were busy. I want to stop for a moment and talk about how much of a patriot she was and what she accomplished. She was a pretty wealthy woman. And as I said, she lived in that big house in Quebec called Le Chateau. But she had an apartment in Brussels. And in that apartment, that too was considered a safe house. And a Russian soldier who had been captured in Stalingrad was taken to work in the mines of Belgium, in Belgium. He escaped, and somehow he made his way into the apartment in Brussels, where she opened it up to the underground as a safe house. And again, picture what my mother did. This man was in isolation, not speaking neither French nor Flemish, but Russian, and couldn't communicate with anybody. And he apparently went into a deep depression. Somehow, it was said to my mother, and she left the attic and went to that apartment to speak with him, to get him to realize there were other people. At the liberation, they got together, my father, my mother, my sister, and Sergei. And of course, walked the streets of Brussels, and he disappeared after that, wherever he went. Somehow we all think that he never went back to Russia. But you think back of the way my mother exposed herself to do something that she thought was necessary.
So let's go back to Mrs. Roy.
Jeanne Roy.
Yeah. What other activities were taking place in response to acts against the Nazis?
I don't know what you mean by that.
what other activities beside burying weapons and gasoline and
I don't know what she did, but I know she was busy. Well, one of the things she did that I am very much aware of, that house in Quebec was also a safe house. And it opened up to two American flyers who had been shot down around Quebec. And they were on their way to the south of France to get back to England, to get back to their units. So they spent a few days, I think less than a week, in hiding in Quebec. So now you have a little Jewish girl and you have two American pilots. One of them, I remember his name quite well, Captain Alfred Sanders. And there's quite a story about him too. For a number of years, he and I corresponded. When I came to the United States, I still corresponded with him. And then I went away to school, I was married, I lost track altogether. Forward number of years. And I'm living in Florida, and my son calls me one day and says, "Mom, I saw an obit. There's a Captain Alfred Sanders living on the west coast of Florida. He was teaching there, I don't know where. Unfortunately, I was made aware of it a day or so after his passing. There was a phone number there, and I wanted to connect with the family. And I called, and I'm trying to explain to this woman who I am. I say, my name is, etc. And I hear, of all the scams, I've never heard anything like that. And down went the receiver. Of course, I never tried again. Whether it was, whatever the reason, I'm still trying to understand the reaction. I wasn't asking for anything. So it wasn't for, it was one of these things. He was living, he was teaching about what, 60, 80, less than 100 miles, and we could have connected again.
yeah.
So going back to these two Americans spent about a week in hiding. And we have some funny incidents about their hiding, and eventually they got back to their units.
So let me ask you again, did this group of patriots or resistance people have a name as a group?
If they did, I wouldn't know. I only know Maurice Questemont, her father, whom I met on various occasions, but didn't know exactly what his position was. Everything was done furtively, in hiding, and you know.
And so how long were you with Madame Rouet?
Probably about 8 months. But those 8 months were very memorable.
Made a big impression on
Oh,
your
yes.
life.
Oh, yes. And after the war...
Tell me about liberation.
Pardon?
Tell me about liberation.
Liberation. I'm trying to remember which day of the week it was, but I don't. But anyway, my uncle, his wife, and my cousin Roland, little 1-year-old, were living with mon oncle in the village next to Quebec. And I periodically would walk there. And that morning, I decided to go and see them. And I remember the feeling. It was an eerie feeling. Everything was so quiet. And I was walking, I don't think I even got there. I felt uncomfortable and I ran back to Madame Roire. It was on a Sunday. And the reason I remember it was on a Sunday is that there was no help. She was alone. And all of a sudden we heard some fighting outside. So we locked the house and we ran down into a cellar. Then things quieted down and we went up in one of the bedrooms, looked out, saw some military cars, opened up the window and started to wave. And the response was shooting at us, which we dropped to the floor, managed to close the window and run back down to the cellar. Then it quieted down and we came up, looked out, and we saw at the end of the property, and you'll see, I have pictures of that, there was a military jeep or something like that, a couple of them. One was a German one, and the others were British. The British were the ones who liberated us.
Who was shooting at you?
The Germans. They were fleeing. But, we had no concept, no idea of what was going on, of course. But we thought, hey, we were liberated. So
the British are there, and then what happened?
Something I have never forgotten. We went to the gate, and there was a German soldier, officer, whatever, who had been wounded, and he was bleeding. And Jean Roy turns to me and says, go inside and get some water and get whatever it was that she asked me to get to attend to him. And I stopped and I looked at her and said, how can you do that? He's a German. Your husband is in a camp. And she looked at me and said, he's a human being. He needs help. I've never forgotten that.
What was your response to her?
I went to the house and I brought out what I was told to bring out or asked to bring out.
And the Germans survived?
Most probably, I don't know. Couldn't care less at the time.
And then, once you were liberated, then what happened?
Another unusual thing. My brother, I was almost 13. He was 16 and a half, so somehow managed to come from Brussels to Quebec. Some military things, I don't know how he managed, never asked him. And all of a sudden he presented himself at the door. The night before we had seen Brussels, what looked like in flame in that direction. And we were positive that Brussels had been destroyed. And of course, I was pretty upset thinking of my family. And all of a sudden, my brother shows up. And I don't even think that he stayed overnight. I don't remember, but all I remember was, I want to go see my mother. I want to go back home. Because that was home for me, being with my parents.
And where was your sister at that time?
In the attic with my parents. My brother just took off and was going to find his sister.
So your brother and your sister went back to Brussels before you went back?
They were in the attic while I was with Jean Roy.
I thought they were in the next village.
No, no. When back up, we were told the Germans were coming to get the children. We went to Brussels. We were reunited with my parents in the attic. My brother and sister stayed in the attic until the liberation. I was the one who, okay.
So how was your reunion then?
I don't remember. I don't remember. It just, it was so much joy, confusion, emotions that were repressed after a while. But must have been a few days after that, I decided that I was going to go back to the school that I was there last. And as I walked into the school, there stood Madame Beuys, my teacher, and the head of the school. At the head of the school, la directrice, the principal, turned to me and said, "You coming back, aren't you?" I said, "No, I'm going to the lycée." And she turned to my former teacher and said, "They always think they can do everything." That spurred me on. I took the exam to be accepted to the lycée, and I flunked the maths. So I was accepted on probation. Well, I was going to show that I could make it. Our school was a trimester basis. At the end of the first trimester, I was the head of the class. They were going to show. There's certain things that make an impression on you that you never, never forget. I forget many things now, but that, no.
You were a determined young woman.
Yes, I was determined. That came from my mother.
How long did you stay in Brussels after liberation?
We left in 1948, 4 years, 4.5 years.
And how were the situations after the war?
In terms of what?
In terms of any anti-Semitism, the reaction?
I didn't notice.
Food supply was?
I was never hungry.
And how did you decide that you and the family were going to leave?
Remember, my paternal grandfather was here before World War I. My parents were on the Polish quarter ever since I can remember. And we finally made it in 1948 on the Polish quarter.
Tell me about the day you left.
The day I left, I had mixed emotions, I think. anticipation to see the land of gold, the, the land of opportunities, anticipation to meet the American family, which turned out to be a big disappointment, but that's something else.
No, you can tell me about that.
Pardon?
Tell me about that. Why was it a disappointment?
They treated us as greenhorns. We also arrived there with ambition and with more education than they had, and they resented it. So within a week to 2 weeks, my father's sister, who was living in Brooklyn, thought it was too much to have the greenhorns in her apartment and actually basically chased us out. So yes, it was a big disappointment. We had no interchange, no connection with them. My brother and sister made something of ourselves. My brother became an attorney. I, after doing a couple of things, was a chemistry teacher for more than 30 years. It was a different thing.
Well, okay, let's go back a little bit. What time of the year did you arrive in
the day before Thanksgiving, and they would not allow us to get off the ship because it was a holiday. They couldn't dock. So we sat on the ship and saw the lights of the cars going, on the highway, thinking, when are we getting there?
The name of the ship was?
Pardon?
The name of the ship?
SS Vinkt.
And how many refugees, would you say, were coming across to the United States? How many other survivors?
That I knew of, never gave it a thought, but of the initial group, actually, who was going to flee on that truck, one family went to California eventually. I remember that. And then another classmate of mine that I remember also went eventually to California. And that's about all I remember, maybe a handful of people we knew.
What kind of ship was it? A passenger ship or a troop ship?
It was used during the war it was a relatively small ship. We were less than 20 passengers.
How long did it take for them to come across?
Forever. About 11 days. In November, that was not an easy passage. My mother got sick on day 2 and wasn't able to leave the cabin till we got to the States.
What was your first impression of arriving in the United States?
Overwhelmed. Didn't know what to think of the members of the family. Was taken from Brooklyn immediately that Saturday, that was Thanksgiving Saturday, to the Bronx. Well, just picture yourself getting to the Bronx and being taken to the hairdresser salon to watch my cousin having her hair done. Totally different from what I was used to.
And so, what languages were you speaking at this time? Did you know any English at all?
Yes. I was in my 5th year of high school, lycée. So I had English for 3.5 years. So I had the basics, I had the grammar, but I wasn't able to, I didn't have the fluency, I didn't have the vocabulary, but that came very easily. You immerse yourself in a language and you pick it up.
So you've left your aunt's house, and where did the family go?
Again, we were separated. My brother and I were shipped to the other sister of my father,
Her name.
Pressisen. What was her first name? One was Nettie, and the other one, her last name was Pressisen. She had a little chicken farm in Somerville, New Jersey. And I mean, that was a little chicken farm. And this is November, so I'm enlisted in high school in Somerville, New Jersey. I don't know much English, I understand, but I'm not verbal, really. And I'm thrown in with these kids from Somerville. I don't think there was one Jewish family there. So that's another different exposure. And I did not like it, obviously. There was a cousin who had a son who was the same age as my brother, but he didn't want to have anything to do with my brother. So my brother turns to me around Christmas time when school was out, and he says, "I'm not staying here." And I said to him, "I'm not staying here if you're not staying here." So we took the bus and went back to Brooklyn. By that time, my parents had found an apartment. They couldn't rent it. They had to buy what was in that apartment. And my family was telling my parents, "It's very difficult. You're really lucky to have that." It was a dive. But we were together, the 5 of us.
And continue with your education?
I went to high school in Brooklyn, New Utrecht High School, for a year. And then I went to college, Hunter College in New York City. I graduated and majored in chemistry, minored in physics, math and physics. And I stayed in college. I got my degree in 3.5 years. And I got a teaching assistantship at Purdue University. Miracle of miracles. My mother and father let me go to Indiana. I don't think they had any idea where Indiana was, nor did I know what Indiana was like. And I am at Purdue University. I'm around 20 years of age, that's a 21 in between. And I am a teacher assistant, and the young in the School of Economics at, that means the women, you know, I'm helping to teach women who are young girls who are the same age as I am. So that was another experience, kind of intimidating. There was an entering class at Purdue University graduates, 65. 4 of us were women, all of them men. That's another experience of the 60s, 50s.
And how long did you stay at Purdue?
I was supposed to be there for 2 years to get a master's, but I had met my husband-to-be, and he was a fundraiser for UJA working in Texas, and I was in Indiana. Letters were going back and forth. He came to see me. We decided that this isn't going to go on like that. I gave up my master's search, or I didn't get the master's degree. After 1 year, I left Purdue, came back to New York, worked for a while as a lab assistant at NYU, doing some research. Didn't last there very long because we got married. We moved out to Glen Cove, Long Island. I worked there as an industrial chemist, and my daughter was born.
When you were an industrial chemist, what company was that with?
Columbia Ribbon and Carbon. I don't know if you remember. Duplication used to be done by putting a sheet of blue or black carbon paper. That's what we were making. And we were trying to find a way of carbonless duplication. We managed to produce some in the lab, but the duplication used to fade. So when my daughter was born, I left and was for a couple of years, 3 years, 4 years, housewife, mother. And while I was taking care of the children, I went back to school, got my certificate, my teaching certificate. And while I was doing my student teaching, I was offered the position of teaching science in the science department in Glen Cove, Long Island. I was the only woman in that department.
What school was it?
Glen Cove High School on the North Shore of Long Island.
Tell me when your daughter was born.
My daughter was born prematurely. So for 7.5 weeks, she was in a neonatal preemie nursery.
What was the date of her birth?
October 10th, 1956.
And her name?
Lucette, Lucette, Nadel Cran today, grandmother.
And what other children did you have?
2. Within less than 2 years, my son was born, Alan, A-L-A-N, Nadel, grandfather too now.
His date of birth?
January, wait a minute, 56, that's 58, and the day 29, I think I'm correct.
19 what?
1958. She was 56. Oh, come on now. She was born on the 26th of October, and he was born on the 29th of January. There we go. Wait till they see that and I have the dates wrong.
And grandchildren? How many?
4.
Their names?
All right, the eldest, that's my daughter's eldest son, Adam Cran, and Joshua Cran. My son has a girl, Allison Nadel Kavanaugh, and a son, David Nadel.
And any great grandchildren?
Yes, I have at this point 4 of them. My daughter is the grandmother of 2. A little boy, Eli Cran, and a little girl, Joan Cran. My son is the grandfather of 2, Allison Nadel Kavanaugh and David Nadel.
These are your great grandchildren?
Those are my grandchildren.
The great grandchildren.
Grandchildren.
Great.
Okay, I got confused there. On my son's side, it's Claire Kavanaugh and James Kavanaugh.
Any more children? Grandchildren? Great grandchildren?
Well, great grandchildren, I have no idea. The grandchildren, no.
And now tell me about your husband. You told me how you met, but tell me about him.
His name was Samuel. We were married in November 1954. We met when I was having a summer job between my junior and senior year in college. He happened to be working where I was being employed, where I got my summer job, which was supposed to be a regular full-time job, but I lied. And he and I had a pretty good life together.
Where was he born?
Connecticut Yankee.
When did he pass?
2010. And that was that.
How often do you speak about your experiences during World War II?
Not too often.
How was your faith in what your religion taught you affected by your experiences? You said you weren't a religious Jewish person, but how was your faith in God affected by your experiences, if at any?
I was trained as a scientist. And my concept of God is not what the average person has. You want me to go on?
Sure.
I don't know what you want to hear. I am not religious. I do not follow the faith. Yes, I do want to celebrate the holidays. It gets the family together. But I'll do without the prayers.
How did your experiences during the war affect the way you brought your children, if anything?
I wanted to make sure that they knew of the Jewish background. And although my late husband and I were not religious, he was brought up more religious than I. I wanted to give my children the background. And we were members of a Reformed temple for as long as the children were willing to go and belong, which meant that my daughter decided just before confirmation that she had had it and gave it up. And my son was looking forward to bar mitzvah and give it up. So after that, both Sam and I felt we did what we thought we should do, and that was that.
What are your feelings towards Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and all the other European countries that were affected by the Nazi invasion?
When I went back to Belgium the first time with my husband, and one of the countries that we went to was going to be, well, we went to England, Belgium, Holland, Luxembourg, and I refused to step into Germany. But that's over. I don't feel that way anymore.
What changed you?
When I think about it, I cannot keep on blaming the next generations for what their fathers, grandfathers did. Because if I look at this country, we have the same thing.
How do you feel about what's going on today?
I have been saying for years that history is repeating itself, and I'm frightened. Not for me, not for my children, but for my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And I'm hoping that what I'm fearing is wrong, will not happen, is what I mean by wrong.
And what about Israel? What do you feel about what's going on there?
I believe we should have a country that represents the Jewish people. But I'm not an Israeli. I stopped going to a group of Hadassah because every time we met, the first allegiance was the flag of Israel and the second one of the United States. I came here, I became an American, and I believe that that's my country. I support Israel up to a point. I don't support all their actions. I hesitate to say some of that because I don't know who's going to see that in the future. But that's my feeling.
How do you think we can fight all of this anti-Semitism and hatred and bigotry that's going on? What can we do about it?
I don't have the answer. People more bright than I am, who know more, don't seem to have the answer.
What do you believe is important to you today?
To spend as much time with my family as possible. To be as little of a burden to them as possible. and to do as much as I can as an independent person.
What do you think the experiences that you had during your time in Brussels, Belgium in general, affected you as a person?
You mean my war experience or
Yeah.
my being brought up in Belgium?
No, your war experiences.
It leaves a mark on your personality. I have ignored it for many, many years because I had one aim: to make something of myself, to have a family, to protect my family, that my children would not go through what I did.
What message would you like to leave for all of the family members who will see this interview in perpetuity, because it will be saved in perpetuity?
What message? To do the best they can to be a human person, a human being. That we all have the right to live and live in peace.
What would you say is your most personal accomplishment?
I don't know how to answer that. Maybe, wait a minute, that I have succeeded in bringing up a family that I'm very proud of.
Is there anything you'd like to add at this time?
That I hope that if anybody sees this, that they take it in a good way. I am not trying to teach anybody. I'm just hoping that if people take the time to look at this, to understand what can be done that is negative to another individual, and that individual, if given the chance, can overcome it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tell me who these two people are.
My maternal grandparents. This is my Bubba. And I never knew my grandfather, her husband. He died in Poland. She came over to Belgium after I was born, obviously.
And his name is?
His name was Victor Rosenbaum.
And they're your maternal
grandparents.
Thank you. And this picture?
My father's father, my paternal grandfather, whom I did not know, never met. He died in the United States. I don't know when he died, but he came before World War I. Before World War I.
And his name was?
His last name, okay. His name was Nathan Fleischman, although my father's name was David Bertman.
And you explained that earlier.
Yes.
Thank you. And this picture is?
My mother and father at the time of their engagement in Poland.
Approximately what year?
Well, let's see. That must be in the 20s, probably probably, I will assign a date, 1923, 24.
And their names again?
David Bertman, my father, and Sarah Gittler Rosenbaum Bertman.
Thank you. And this picture?
My sister and brother in Poland, just before they came to Belgium, in Lublin. My sister's name, in French, Marie, but her name at that time in Yiddish was Malke Norma. And my brother, Nathan Bertman.
Thank you. And this picture?
Well, as it says underneath, the yellow star we had to wear from 1942 on the left side of every piece of garment. They only gave you one per person, which meant that if you had one coat, that was fine. If you had two coats, that became a problem.
Thank you. And this set of 3 pictures, can you tell me about them?
My mother and father holding on to my sister and brother, and that must be before I was born.
And the next picture next to it?
I am there already. The same thing, my father, mother, brother, sister, and I'm in that beautiful carriage.
And the one on the bottom?
That was taken, I remember that one when it was taken. That was my sister, my brother, and I in the middle. That was to be sent to Poland.
Thank you. And this picture?
This was the picture of my uncle, is on the left, his wife, and my cousin Roland, and that's during the war. And the couple to the right is mon oncle, not my uncle, but we called him mon oncle, and his wife.
And if I recall, you didn't have his name.
No, I don't know his last name.
And where was this picture taken?
That must have been taken in the countryside, in the village where they were living.
Thank you. These 2 pictures?
Those were taken the day of liberation that's around Quebec, and the military little vehicles that we see are of the Brits who liberated us, and one of them is a German, and the house in the back is Le Chateau, the castle, the house of Madame Roy, of Jeanne Roy.
And the bottom picture?
The bottom picture is another picture showing the Germans leaving Quebec, whatever. That right in front of us, in front of the chateau.
Thank you. And these 2 pictures?
These are the 2 pictures of Jeanne Roy and me. The top one is when, before the liberation, when I was in hiding with her, living with her. And the bottom one was taken when I was a second year in the lycée. That's after the war, when she was then living in Brussels, around Brussels, in the outskirts of Brussels. And I was a second year in high school.
Thank you. And this set of pictures, starting with the top one?
The top one is a group of friends and family on the pier, seeing us off to the United States on the SS Vingt. And the one right underneath it is the same thing.
And on the right?
What's on the right? I don't. Oh, that looks like the farm. That looks like Quebec, the top, what it does here. And the bottom is my high school friend, Rosette Kirchner, now Rosette Kirchner Ruck, seeing me off to the United States.
And where is she today?
She lives in Cannes. She just became widowed, and I was able to reconnect with her after quite a number of years.
And her name again?
Rosette, maiden name Kirchner, married name Ruck, R-U-C-K.
Thank you. And these letters are written in French, but can you tell me about both of them?
Yes, these are copies of letters that are now in the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And they are attesting to the fact that, yes, I was a little underground person. I was a helper in the underground of the group active in Quebec when I was in hiding with Jean Roy. The left one is from the commander of the group. The right side is his right side man.
And the signatures, can you tell me what the signature says?
Well, this
The
one,
name?
Questemont, it says, oh, fait à Quebec. Okay, it gives the date when it was written and the address of the commander.
And what's the signature?
Here is Dehoney, and he was, if I remember correctly, the right hand of Questemont.
Thank you. Okay, and so what was the name of the partisan group?
Le Front de l'Indépendance.
And who did you know in the group specifically?
I had met the leader of the group, Questemont. I don't remember the man on the right, but I may have met him too. I met several men.
Thank you.
And
this certificate?
this is the certificate that was issued by Yad Vashem. Jean Roy is on the Wall of the Righteous for the section of the Belgians for the particular year. That's how it's arranged there on the wall. And that is the recognition that was given to her in
Righteous.
1996.
Righteous amongst the nations.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Thank you. This letter is?
Well, this is the announcement of the passing of Jeanne Roy, who at that time was the widow of Marcel Roy, her late husband.
And how did you get this letter?
One of her surviving sisters sent me that.
Thank you.
This letter, again, is written in French, and basically it says that they have the pleasure to let me know that Yad Vashem has given the title of the Just Among the Nations to the person named here for having helped at the risk and perils of her life Jews that were in danger during the occupation. A medal and a diploma of honor under her name will be sent to the diplomatic Israeli mission the nearest one of the address of the recipient. A copy of this letter is addressed to people who have given testimony, as well as to other persons involved. And best whatever it is. Please accept my best sentiment, feelings, and it is signed by Mordecai Paldine, director of the Department of the Trust.
Thank you. And this picture, how did you happen to have this picture? That's the first question.
Well, that was a picture that my mother had, and this was taken in Poland, in Lublin. The reason it was taken is that my mother was leaving Poland, Lublin, to go and join her husband, my father, in Brussels, Belgium. So she was leaving behind her family and coming to join her husband. The numbers represent a particular member of the family.
All right, let's start with number one. Tell me the name.
The number one is my mother, Sarah Bertman.
Number two.
My brother, Nat Bertman.
Number three.
My grandmother, Shaina Rosenbaum.
Number four.
My sister, Marie Bertman Sewall.
Number five.
My uncle, the youngest one, Marcel Rosenbaum.
Number six.
My grandfather, Nathan Rosenbaum.
Number seven.
My mother's sister, Rivke, and her husband, don't know his name.
So that's 7 and 8 then.
Correct.
9.
9 is Yitzke, my mother's brother.
10.
Number 10 is another brother of my mother, Froyam.
11.
That's another brother of my mother, Mark Rosenbaum.
12.
12, 13 are my mother's sister and her husband and child, and her name I do not remember.
How many people in that picture perished during the war?
All of those left in Poland.
And which ones were they?
Except my mother, my brother and sister, and my grandmother, and number 5, my uncle, Marcel. They escaped. The others, all of the others, except for number 6, my grandfather, who died before, the rest of them all perished, either in Warsaw or in Lublin.
Thank you. Sure.
My late husband, Samuel Nadel.
And he perished, he died when?
2010.
Thank you. In this picture?
My family when I was 90 years old, 2 years ago.
Starting on the left.
Starting on the left is my grandson-in-law, Robert Kavanaugh.
And the next one, the lady next to him?
My Daniela Colhagen, girlfriend of David Bertman. David Nadel, my youngest grandson, the one I call my baby grandson.
And the gentleman in the red hat.
My eldest grandson, my daughter's son, Adam Cran, and his wife, Dana Cran.
And the next lady with the glasses.
My niece, my brother's daughter, Vivian, and her husband, Emmett Saki.
And going back under your,
To the left,
yes, the young lady.
the wife of my granddaughter, Allison, holding on to her little daughter next to her husband, Robert Cavanaugh.
And then there's another lady with glasses.
My daughter-in-law next to her husband, my son. So it's Stacy Nadel and Alan Nadel.
And then going down to the bottom.
With a little bow is my little great-granddaughter, Claire, quite talkative now with an English accent. And next to her is my son-in-law, and I'm holding on to him. And next to me...
And your son-in-law's name?
Oh, Barry Cran. I'm in the middle, holding on to him, and next to me is my daughter, Lucette Nadel Cran. Next to her is her daughter-in-law, Allison Cran, leaning against her husband, my grandson, Joshua Cran, and they holding on to their eldest little son, Eli Cran, Eli Samuel Cran.
And where was this picture taken?
This is a composite of many pictures. My granddaughter, Allison, thought that a nice gift would be to give Grandma on her 90th birthday, so she requested each one of them to send a picture, and then she and a photographer, I guess, composed this.
Very nice. Thank you.
That was